Hello, and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve, and like many of you out there, I've been struck with a red flag ahead of Game Week 37, in which I will be deploying my bench boost. In fact, as you can see on screen, it is already active. However, unlike many of you, my injured man happens to be Van Heck, who is basically my 15th man in the squad and was actually the last position I filled on my wildcard a couple of weeks ago, as he was the best punt I could find to fill that final bench boost spot. Now, what might not be very obvious, at least it wasn't to me when I started thinking about replacing Van Heck, is that it might actually be worthwhile bench boosting without a full bench this game week instead of upgrading Van Heck. Now I have two free transfers in the bank, two free transfers and 2.2 million in the bank. So I've got more than enough resources to deal with Van Heck. But irrespective of this, I've actually come to the conclusion that not having a 15th man might actually be the meta play. So before we jump into it, remember to give this a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, especially if you get any value out of the following content. Now, first of all, I'll quickly recap the key teams and decisions from last week. So if you're not too interested in that, feel free to use the chapters below to jump through to the relevant parts of the video that you are most interested in. But I came away with 95 points last week. Newcastle. So I thought Isak and Wilson would be on the pitch together in the fixture last weekend, but that Isak would still keep penalties instead of Wilson, who I think a few other content creators and people on Twitter and X and whatnot were thinking was going to be the case. My money's on Isak having the penalties simply because of the golden boot, but also because he is the man that Newcastle are probably going to progress with. He's looking more like the future of Newcastle, assuming that he doesn't get sold, of course. Now, unfortunately, Isak stepped up to take a penalty and actually misses his first penalty since 2021, which actually nullified Gordon's second assist, who was actually the man who was brought down that in order to be awarded the penalty. Now, it didn't matter too much, though, as Isak did score from open play about 4 minutes after the miss. But my thoughts is even though he has missed, I still think Isak is going to hold on to penalties moving forward because Wilson is aging. They don't really need to keep his goal tally too high in order to have a higher value placed on him should they be looking to transfer either of the two on in the summer or in the coming years. And so with Isak at 23 having an outstanding season, like what's he on now? Is that 24 goals? I mean, oh, sorry, that's 24 starts, 20 goals. It's a goal every game. Just because he's missed one penalty, I don't think he's actually going to probably lose them that quickly. Other penalty takers out there do miss and retain penalties. So I think Isak will still hold penalties moving forward. Last week, I talked about not risking the captaincy last week as I could see both Haaland and Isak scoring hat-tricks. And if I went for the lower owned asset, I could totally see Haaland hitting his hat-trick in that game week with Isak not keeping pace and my rank getting decimated as a result. As it so happens, Haaland managed a first half hat-trick and then went on to get another goal in the second half, whereas Isak got a goal and an assist but did miss the penalty, and there was a huge rank swing for this captaincy decision this week. Now, Most people ended up captaining Haaland. I think it was about 156% EO at my rank, or at the ranks in, say, the top 3 to 400k of players. But for anyone who went against Haaland this week, oof, that must have been a pretty hefty red. Feel sorry for you, but yeah, just wasn't the week to be going against Haaland, right? So I'm super glad that I got that decision correct. However, the key decision that I did make last week was to play João Pedro over Son. Now, João Pedro, what a roller coaster of a game from an FPL perspective. He set up his teammates with a couple of amazing chances throughout the match, which were all fluffed. Pedro then also goes through with a one-on-one with Olsen and manages to pass the ball to the side of the keeper on target with pace, but Olsen left a very strong trailing left hand that managed to stop Pedro's inevitable goal from going in. He was then awarded a penalty, which unfortunately Olsen saved. Pedro did, in fact, jump onto the end of the deflection to score the only goal in the fixture. Now, that typically would have been a 7-point goal when it's a 1-0 game, as it usually comes with 3 bonus points, meaning Pedro would have ended up on 9 points for the week. But with a penalty miss of -2 points and only getting 1 bonus point due to the penalty miss, he comes away with 5 points for the game week and a 4-point swing. Now, on Spurs, the reason I benched Son last week is over the last couple of game weeks prior to game week 36, I had been watching quite a bit of Spurs, and I identified that there was quite a big breakdown in the middle of the park in Spurs, and that Maddison obviously has been off form for a little while, shown by Postecoglou in his benching. But I also picked up last week that I didn't think his replacement in Kulusevski did very much better either, and I thought that Liverpool would just have way too much for them in the middle of the park. I mean, they were struggling against lesser opposition than Liverpool, and coming up against Liverpool, I thought they just didn't have a chance in hell of being able to go toe-to-toe with them in the middle of the park. Now, Postecoglou did, in fact, bench Maddison for the second time in a row against Liverpool, but he had also recognised that Kulusevski hadn't fixed the issue either, which is what he had tried the week previous, and something that I discussed in the video last week. But what did catch me off guard, so I thought Maddison was going to actually start this game, but still wouldn't be able to battle with Liverpool in midfield. What caught me off guard was he'd benched Maddison, pushed Kulusevski out to the right wing, which is typically where Kulusevski is the most influential. However, he actually lined Spurs up in a 4-3-3 formation, with Son starting as the number 9 and Richarlison still on the bench. Now, Richarlison is still coming back from, or coming back up to match fitness, so I wasn't too surprised that he was on the bench and that Son was starting up front, but I just thought Son would be absolutely starved of the ball throughout the match. But yeah, Postecoglou obviously changed his formation to try and flood the midfield, matching up against Klopp's 4-3-3 formation. But as it turns out, and as I predicted, it didn't actually make any bit of difference, as Liverpool absolutely dominated the middle of the park, sinking 4 goals past Spurs without reply. Now, Emerson Royale was correctly targeted throughout the game and was no match for the likes of Salah and Elliott out on the right-hand side of the pitch, in which Liverpool just basically ran rampant all game. Now, I bring up Emerson Royale because for all of you out there who are deciding between De Bruyne and Foden, or maybe even looking for an out there captaincy in the double. If Foden is playing out on the right-hand wing, he will be coming up against Emerson Royale, and he is by far Spurs' weakest player in the squad, and I suspect he will get a lot of joy down that side of the pitch. But back to Liverpool versus Spurs. With the game comfortably won at 4-0, Klopp actually started making some wholesale changes. First with a double substitution at the 64th minute, and then another double substitution at the 75th. Spurs made their own substitutes too, bringing on both Maddison and Richarlison, and it wasn't until this point that Spurs actually got a look in, albeit it was very limited. However, I think it was more Liverpool resting players and taking their foot off the gas as opposed to Maddison and Richarlison coming onto the pitch making any sort of meaningful impact to the game. Now, Maddison specifically is still out of form, failing to link up play as effectively as he was early season, and was even trying to force shots from awkward positions, which seems to be his way of trying to kickstart some form back into gear. But nevertheless, and somewhat unfortunately for me, Son ended up on the end of one of the 2 goals scored late in the match. He was otherwise irrelevant for the entire first half. I think Spurs ended up with about 0.04 XG for the entire team in that first half, so they were absolutely crushed. And for very large parts of the second half, Son was also starved of possession, and even when he did get on the ball, didn't look like he could do much with it. Now, his goal was well taken, as we would expect of Son, but had Liverpool not been cruising, I doubt he would have been able to be... Well, I doubt they would have actually gotten that chance. Now, with Pedro's penalty miss, he only came away with 5 points, as opposed to the 9 points he would have received without the pen miss. Obviously, the assists he set up and the one-on-one, it could have been a huge swing had Pedro put everything away and Son not been given that goal. As it turns out, it was a 2-point swing, which put me on a 1-point red arrow for the week. But obviously, if I had not missed that penalty, it would have been a 3-point green arrow, and I would have been up about 10,000 places. Now, thank God, I recognise that it was not the week to go against Haaland, as that would have been a 40k red arrow and a huge dent in my rank heading into the final 2 game weeks. That was pretty much all the key bits and pieces from last week. So we'll now move on to bench boosting without a full bench. So this is my team lined up on screen. I've had a little bit of a look around on Twitter and on YouTube, and actually my team looks very, very similar to the free hit teams that are being proposed out there, apart from obviously the bench, as I am in fact bench boosting. Now, I've got 2 free transfers and 2.2 million in the bank, and Van Heck red flagged. And so the first decision point that I was faced with was, do I upgrade Van Heck to someone, say, like a Ben White, or... I mean, the choices are very limited in game week 37, let's be honest, especially in the defensive areas. Or the defensive options around the place. Or do I just go dirt cheap and only invest about a 0.2 million in Van Heck, upgrading him to someone that's like 4.3 million? Now, the Van Heck injury is probably the most annoying, as he is my 4.1 million enabler. And so any transfer that I do make in order to bring in a somewhat decent asset is actually going to have to invest some of the money that I have sitting in the bank. and who I upgrade to this week, or more accurately, how much of that 2.2 million I choose to spend, will actually limit me for next week's transfers. And the main man I'd like to keep the door open for is actually Mo Salah, who is, well, he did very well in the week just gone. Where's he gone? There he is. Coming away with a 13-pointer, 1 goal and 2 assists. He has Wolves at home on the final day of the season. Wolves, who were just crushed they were crushed last week, right? Or am I getting myself mixed up? Yeah, 5-1 Man City. So Liverpool could do just as much damage on the final game of the season. I wouldn't put too much weight behind it being Klopp's last game of the season. I really don't think that's going to change how Liverpool will play. But if I want to keep my Salah options open, I probably can't spend any more than 0.2 million on upgrading Van Heck, leaving me with only a measly 4.3 million as a replacement for a replacement defender. Now this will allow me some options in Game Week 38 to make a double switch, which involves the selling of Kevin De Bruyne. Now, we've got a lot of the top teams playing 2 games this game week, and so we will have no idea how the league is going to be lining up until the Game Week 37 fixtures and the catch-up matches have been played, but I can definitely see a world in which Salah will be preferred over Kevin De Bruyne in Game Week 38. This will heavily depend on whether City have won the title already or not, because if they have won the title, the threat of rotation in that City squad will be much higher, as Pep will probably look to preserve his top players for the FA Cup final. Now, if they haven't won the title, and I don't have any major injuries in my team, then I'm not actually entirely sure where I'd spend my 2 transfers next week anyway. But given we're not going to know the state of play until after Game Week 37 has concluded, it's really about just leaving the door open for all of the possibilities that might arise given the results across the weekend. Now, if City are still vying for the title, I will probably still want another City asset inside along Haaland. However, in that final game, I'm not actually convinced that Pep will end up going for the jugular. Say if City are up something like with a 2-0 lead, he might just shut the game down and not go, just focus on ball possession, not really trying to push their lead any harder. And so, potentially there's still a bit of a narrative for selling City assets next week. Now, of course, if City have won the title, then I will probably end up selling both De Bruyne and Foden to err on the side of caution in the threat that they may be rotated. Now, Haaland too, for that matter, he may actually end up becoming quite a rotation threat. However, that Golden Boot race, he did do quite a bit of damage to the Golden Boot race in the fixture last weekend, but we don't know what's going to happen across the fixtures in Game Week 37. Perhaps someone like Isak actually, goes out and destroys Brighton and United. He could definitely destroy Brighton, and he could really do damage against Manchester United, given what is going on at United at the moment, especially given the amount of injuries that are happening over there. And so Haaland might still end up playing in Game Week 38, but this is all very speculative right now. I have no idea whether we'll get that information out of Pep either, if he is likely to rest any of his players for the FA Cup. And so I need to leave my Salah options open. Now, it's pretty easy to get Salah in if I'm selling both De Bruyne and Foden. Now, leaving Van Heck in the team at 4.1 million means that I could, without any price changes, go from De Bruyne up to Salah, and Foden, I think I could squeeze in Havertz alongside Salah for the final game week of the season. Now that is bang on money, and price changes obviously could occur over the length of time between now and when all the fixtures will have concluded in game week 37. And so that's very touch and go as to whether or not I will be able to get Havertz in alongside. But if not, I've got around about 7.3 or 7.5 to fill that Foden spot. Now I'll also have to consider players like Saka, as they are at home to Everton next week. And he could actually be quite a key player that I may need to get in game week 38, depending on injuries that come out across the weekend, maybe any surprise results. I mean, there's all sorts that could happen across two fixtures. So I then started to ask myself, should I just bench boost with Van Heck still in the squad? Now, the only real option that I could buy to replace Van Heck would be someone like Veltman at Brighton. And to be honest, I don't actually hold out much hope for Brighton's defensive prospects against Newcastle and Chelsea, who they are coming up against this week. Now, like I said, Van Heck was just the last bench spot that I chucked into my team. It was a very hopeful spot to be filling anyway, and now that he's injured, I'm seriously questioning whether or not it's worthwhile jumping across to someone like Veltman. Now, Veltman has conceded 4 yellow cards in his 14 starts for Brighton. So if he cops another yellow card in the 2 fixtures, he's starting on 3 points for the double. So assuming he makes it to 60 minutes in both fixtures, he'd be on 4 points, potentially 3 points minus a yellow card. And I could totally see a world where both Newcastle and Chelsea score 2 goals or more in each of those fixtures. So he could easily end up coming away with a 1-pointer across the double, or potentially even worse. I mean, if Newcastle put 4 past them and Chelsea put 4 past them, I mean, he could end up on negative points. So is the 0.2 million investment for what I'm thinking is probably most likely going to be a 1 to 3 point return from someone like Veltman really worth it? As well as the fact that that will actually limit my options in game week 38. Now that 0.2 million could actually make quite a bit of difference in game week 38. I think it is, in fact, the difference between, say, Salah and Trossard versus Salah and Havertz. So I think I'm out of Havertz by about 0.2 million as of right now. So, if I upgrade, I mean, the very first knee-jerk reaction when I saw Van Heck was probably properly injured was to go and buy someone like a Ben White, a single game week player from Arsenal with pretty good attacking upside and a very good fixture on paper. They are away to Man United. Yes, it is at Old Trafford, but Casemiro playing centre-back is just painful to watch. He's doing Maguire-like things, apart from the fact that Maguire quite often rushes out of the line into midfield, dives in, and takes himself out of the game. Casemiro makes it one step worse and ends up doing that and going into a slide tackle, meaning he definitely cannot get back. Evans injured, all the centre-backs are injured, even our second, third choice centre-backs are injured, and United are just playing horribly. So Ben White was my initial reaction. He could easily come away with a clean sheet. I don't see United scoring in this fixture at all. So he could come away with a clean sheet and maybe nab some sort of attacking return. But buying Ben White from a 4.1 Van Heck means I'll actually have to invest 2 million of my 2.2 million. I then have a massive benching dilemma in game week 38, having someone like Ben White in the team. And if I do in fact want to jump across to Salah in game week 38, I will have to sell Ben White, as he would probably be one of the only players I'd be willing to sell, but as part of a 3 transfer move, meaning it will invoke a hit. So will Ben White outscore whoever I put in this Van Heck spot by more than 4 points in order to make a potential 3 transfer move in game week 38 worthwhile? I mean, it would only take a jammy long-range effort from Fernandes to ruin the clean sheet and for Ben White not to pick up an attacking return, and I've completely shot myself in the foot for game week 38. So, given all this, I'm actually leaning towards just leaving Van Heck in the team and bench boosting with 14 men instead of the full complement of 15. Now, I do actually have 2 free transfers though, and that does seem like a bit of a waste. But if I only had 1 free transfer, I'm pretty sure I would probably just leave Van Heck in the team, roll the transfer, and allow myself 2 transfers for game week 38. But considering I already have 2 free transfers available to me, I'm actually looking at downgrading Van Heck to Richards from Palace, who's actually only 3.9 million. He's got a single game week. He's coming up against Wolves away. Now, I don't think Wolves are going to score 2 goals. Wolves have not really been attacking too well across the entire season, and so worst case, I'm thinking Richards comes away with 2 points, assuming he plays. Now, I do not know the likelihood of whether or not Richards plays. He has played the last 4 game weeks for Palace. He's got 90 minutes, 4 weeks in a row. Looks like he's been relatively nailed for a large part of the season. But given I'm more than happy to I would have been happy to just play Van Heck instead. I mean, who knows? Maybe he comes back from injury and plays that Chelsea game. But it seems like going down to Richards to give me a little bit more money and flexibility in game week 38, which will allow any price swings for De Bruyne, Foden, Havertz, and Salah, who look like my 2 front runners for bringing in game week 38, looks to be the most meta play. So it looks like I'll be buying an ultra differential single game week player this week in order to provide more funds for my final 2 transfers of the season in game week 38. And alright, well, that wraps up this video. And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a comment to tell us what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers.